They lit up living rooms across America, made us laugh, made us cry. Then they disappeared. Some you remember, others you've completely forgotten. But every single one of them has a grave that sits empty of visitors, collecting dust while the world moves on. These are the TV child stars no one comes to see anymore. We're going to 15 burial sites across this country. Some are in famous cemeteries you've heard of. Others are in places so obscure you'd never find them without a map. One isn't even marked. And what we're going to uncover isn't just where they're buried. It's what Hollywood did to them, what fame cost them, and why nobody remembers to bring flowers anymore. Before we start, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what comes next. Let's start in the one place every forgotten star eventually ends up. A cemetery in Los Angeles, where the only visitors are tourists looking for someone else. Anissa Jones. Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Tucked between office buildings and the Paramount lot. Tourists flood in daily looking for Judy Garland, looking for Johnny Ramone, looking for anyone famous enough to photograph. They walk right past a small marker they don't recognize. Anissa Jones. If you're over 50, that name hits different. She was Buffy. Pigtails, big eyes, that rag doll she carried everywhere. Family Affair ran on CBS from 1966 to 1971, and for 5 years she was America's little sister. 8 years old when it started. The doll was Mrs. Beasley and it became the hottest toy in the country. Parents couldn't keep them on shelves. Then the show got canceled. She was 13, typecast into oblivion. She auditioned for The Exorcist. Director William Friedkin took one look and said no. The audience would only see Buffy possessed, not the character. Her parents had divorced during the show's run. The money was mismanaged. And Anissa started disappearing into a world that didn't care who she used to be. August 28, 1976. A friend's house in Oceanside, California. They found her body in the early morning. The coroner's report described the overdose as one of the most severe he'd ever documented. Cocaine, PCP, quaaludes, barbiturates, all at once. Anissa Jones was 18 years old. Her mother had her cremated. The ashes were scattered over the Pacific Ocean. No grave, no marker, nothing you can visit. Just water and sky and the memory of a girl in pigtails who smiled on command and died before she could vote. Family Affair went into syndication the year she died. It played in reruns for decades. Millions watched little Buffy hug Mr. French and clutch Mrs. Beasley. Not one of them knew the girl who played her was already gone. Dana Plato. Leave Los Angeles, head east toward the ocean. We're not looking for a headstone this time either. Dana Plato's ashes were scattered over the Pacific just like Anissa Jones. 2 TV daughters. 2 overdoses. Both reduced to particles floating somewhere in the same water. But Dana's story cuts deeper because millions watched her fall apart in real time. Different Strokes premiered on NBC in 1978 and became an instant hit. Dana played Kimberly Drummond, the older sister in a white family that adopts 2 black kids from Harlem. The show tackled serious issues, racism, drugs, child abuse, wrapped in a sitcom package that America devoured every Thursday night. For 6 seasons, Dana was the wholesome big sister, the moral center, the girl next door. Then, she got pregnant. She was 19, unmarried, and the producers panicked. This wasn't part of the wholesome image they'd built. They fired her midway through season 6, wrote her character out, and replaced her storyline with guest stars. The show kept running. Dana's career stopped cold. After Different Strokes ended in 1986, the roles dried up completely. She couldn't get auditions, couldn't pay bills. In 1991, desperate and broke, she walked into a Las Vegas video store with a pellet gun and demanded cash. The clerk handed over $164, then called 911. When the dispatcher asked who robbed him, he said, "The girl who played Kimberly on Different Strokes." She was arrested within hours. The tabloids feasted. The trial was a circus. She avoided prison, but the damage was permanent. What followed was a spiral through low-budget films, Playboy, and a battle with addiction that everyone could see, but nobody stopped. May 8, 1999. Moore, Oklahoma. She was visiting her fiancé's mother for Mother's Day weekend. The day before, she'd appeared on the Howard Stern show via phone, and Howard confronted her on air about her sobriety. She insisted she was clean. She wasn't. The next afternoon, they found her in an RV parked in the driveway. Overdose. Prescription painkillers mixed with muscle relaxants. The medical examiner ruled it intentional. Dana Plato was 34 years old. Her son Tyler was 14 when his mother died. He grew up in the shadow of that loss, in the shadow of her addiction, in the shadow of a TV show that destroyed his family. On May 6, 2010, 11 years to the day after Dana's death, Tyler Lambert took his own life. He was 25, mother and son, both gone, both scattered over the same ocean. Different Strokes is still on streaming platforms. You can watch all 8 seasons right now. See Dana smile in the opening credits, young and hopeful and completely unaware of what's coming. The show's theme song promised that it takes different strokes to move the world. What it didn't mention was the cost of being one of those strokes. Gary Coleman. We're staying with Different Strokes because this show didn't just destroy one career, it destroyed 3. Gary Coleman's ashes were scattered near a railroad track in Illinois. No ceremony, no headstone, just his family, some friends, and the sound of trains passing through a town most people have never heard of. This is what happens when you're the highest paid child actor on television and end up with nothing. Gary was 10 years old when Different Strokes premiered in 1978. He played Arnold Jackson, the younger of the 2 adopted brothers, and his catchphrase, "What you talkin' about, Willis?" became embedded in American culture so deeply that people still say it today without remembering where it came from. At the peak of the show's success, Gary was pulling in $100,000 per episode. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $300,000 in today's money. Per episode. For a kid who wasn't old enough to drive. The money should have set him up for life. It didn't. Gary suffered from a congenital kidney disease that stunted his growth and required 2 transplants before he turned 15. He spent his childhood hooked up to dialysis machines between takes, smiling on camera while his body slowly failed him. The disease kept him at 4'8" for his entire life, which meant that, even when Different Strokes ended in 1986, he couldn't transition to adult roles. He looked like a child. Hollywood had no use for him. Then he discovered the money was gone. His parents and his business manager had mismanaged, misappropriated, and in some cases outright stolen his earnings. Gary sued them in 1989 and won a $1.3 million judgment. But legal fees ate most of it, and what was left disappeared into medical bills and bad investments. By the mid-1990s, he was broke. He worked as a security guard in a shopping mall. Fans would recognize him, ask for autographs, ask him what he was doing there. He'd smile and say he needed the work. The tabloids ran photos. The humiliation was public and complete. Gary's personal life became a string of headlines nobody wanted to read. Arrested for assault, sued multiple times. A disastrous run for California governor in 2003 where he finished 8th. A marriage that ended in restraining orders and allegations of domestic violence. He became a punchline, a cautionary tale, a symbol of child stardom gone wrong. May 26, 2010. Santaquin, Utah. Gary fell at his home and hit his head. His wife Shannon called 911, but there was confusion about whether she should have called sooner, whether she delayed, whether the fall was even an accident. He suffered an intracranial hemorrhage. 2 days later, he was taken off life support. Gary Coleman was 42 years old. The legal battle over his estate turned ugly immediately. Shannon claimed she was his wife and entitled to everything. His ex-wife claimed the marriage was never legal. His parents, who he'd sued decades earlier, claimed they deserved a share. It dragged through courts for years. The man who once made $100,000 per episode left behind $75,000 in debt. No funeral was held. His ashes were scattered near those railroad tracks in Illinois, far from Hollywood, far from the sound stage where Arnold Jackson made America laugh, far from everything. Different Strokes ran for 8 seasons. It launched 3 child stars into orbit. All 3 crashed. Dana Plato overdosed at 34. Gary Coleman died broke at 42. And the third, we'll get to him later, but his story might be the darkest of all. The show is still available to stream, still making money for the network, for the producers, for everyone, except the kids who made it possible. Judith Barsi. Forest Lawn Memorial Park. Hollywood Hills, sprawling green lawns, palm trees, views of the San Fernando Valley stretching out below. It's peaceful here. Quiet, the kind of place where you'd want someone you love to rest. For 16 years, Judith Barsi rested here in an unmarked grave. No headstone, no plaque. Nothing to indicate that beneath the grass lay a 10-year-old girl whose voice made millions of children smile. Her mother was buried next to her, also unmarked, also forgotten. Then in 2004, strangers on the internet raised money to buy them headstones. Let that sink in. Fans who never met her, who only knew her voice, paid to mark her grave because no one else would. Judith Barsi wasn't a live-action TV star. She was a voice actress, one of the most talented child performers in animation history. You've heard her even if you don't know it. She was Ducky in The Land Before Time, the little green dinosaur whose catchphrase, "Yep, yep, yep," became iconic. She was Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven. She appeared in dozens of TV commercials. She had guest spots on Cheers, Remington Steele, Growing Pains, The Twilight Zone reboot. Director Don Bluth called her absolutely astonishing and had plans to build his next 3 films around her voice. She never lived to see any of it released. Judith's father was Joseph Barsi, a Hungarian immigrant and unemployed plumber who drank every day and terrorized his family every night. He threatened to kill Judith. He threatened to kill her mother Maria. He made those threats so often, so loudly, that neighbors called the police multiple times. Judith's agent noticed bruises. A child psychologist filed a report. Child Protective Services opened a case. Nothing happened. The system failed. The reports went nowhere. The threats continued. And on July 25, 1988, Josef walked into Judith's bedroom while she slept and shot her in the head. Then he found Maria in the hallway and shot her too. For 2 days, their bodies lay in the house while he drank. Then he poured gasoline over them, lit the fire, and shot himself in the garage. Judith Barsi was 10 years old. The Land Before Time was released 4 months later, in November 1988. All Dogs Go to Heaven came out the following year. Millions of children sat in theaters, heard Ducky say "yep, yep, yep," heard Anne-Marie sing, and had no idea the girl behind those voices was already dead. Parents bought the VHS tapes. Kids watched them over and over. Judith's voice became part of their childhood, and she was buried in an unmarked grave. Maria's family couldn't afford a headstone. Judith's agent moved on to other clients. Hollywood forgot. For 16 years, if you wanted to visit Judith Barsi, you had to know exactly where to look on an unmarked patch of grass. And even then, you wouldn't find her name. In 2004, a group of fans who grew up watching The Land Before Time launched an online fundraiser. They raised enough money to purchase 2 headstones, one for Judith, one for Maria. Judith's reads, "Our concrete angel. Yep, yep, yep." Now when you visit Forest Lawn, you can find her. The headstone gets flowers regularly. Strangers leave toys, drawings, letters. People who never met her but grew up hearing her voice come to pay respects that her own industry never did. The Land Before Time spawned 13 direct-to-video sequels. None of them featured Judith's voice. They recast Ducky and kept making money off a character she created. Don Bluth never got to make those 3 films he'd planned around her. He gave interviews years later, still talking about how much talent she had, how much potential, how the loss haunted him. Joseph Barsi's ashes were scattered somewhere. No one knows where. No one cares. Heather O'Rourke. Westwood Village Memorial Park, Los Angeles. Squeezed between office towers and luxury condos in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods, this cemetery is barely larger than a city block, but it holds an astonishing concentration of famous graves. Marilyn Monroe, Natalie Wood, Dean Martin, Roy Orbison. Tourists come for those names. They walk right past a flat marker near the eastern edge. Heather O'Rourke, 1975-1988. If you were alive in the 80s, you know her face. Blonde hair, blue eyes wide as saucers, and 4 words that became one of the most quoted lines in horror film history. They're here. Poltergeist hit theaters in 1982 and terrified a generation. Heather was 5 years old, playing Carol Ann Freeling, the little girl who talks to ghosts through television static. Steven Spielberg spotted her eating lunch in the MGM commissary. Her older sister Tammy was shooting something on the lot, and cast her on the spot. The role had been offered to Drew Barrymore first, but Drew went to Spielberg's other production that year instead. E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Heather's whispered delivery of "They're here" made her an instant icon. The American Film Institute would later rank it number 69 on their list of cinema's greatest quotes. She reprised the role in Poltergeist 2 in 1986 and Poltergeist 3 in 1987. But the films were just the beginning. Heather became a fixture on television throughout the 80s. She had recurring roles on Happy Days and Webster. She appeared in Chips, Fantasy Island, The New Love Boat. She did commercials. She was nominated for 6 Young Artist Awards. By the time she was 12, she'd worked steadily for 7 years. Then her stomach started hurting. January 1987. Heather developed flu-like symptoms that wouldn't go away. Doctors diagnosed Crohn's disease, an inflammatory bowel condition. They put her on medication and told her she'd be fine. She kept working, kept filming Poltergeist 3 without complaint, even when she felt terrible, even when the pain got worse. Super Bowl Sunday, January 31, 1988. Heather woke up violently ill. Her mother rushed her to the hospital. The doctors opened her up and discovered the previous diagnosis was completely wrong. What Heather actually had was a congenital stenosis, an abnormal narrowing of her intestine that had been there since birth. It had gone undetected for 12 years. Septic shock set in. Her organs began shutting down. She suffered cardiac arrest on the operating table. They resuscitated her. She arrested again. They tried again. Heather O'Rourke died on February 1, 1988. She was 12 years old. Poltergeist 3 was released 4 months later in June. MGM debated whether to delay it, whether to reshoot, whether releasing a movie starring a dead child was appropriate. They released it anyway. The film opens with a dedication for Heather. Then the studio collected the box office and moved on. Here's where it gets strange. Dominique Dunne, who played Heather's older sister Dana in the first Poltergeist, is buried in this same cemetery, same small plot of land. Dominique was strangled to death by her ex-boyfriend in 1982. Just months after the first film came out. She was 22. 2 actresses from the same movie. Both dead young, both buried steps apart at Westwood Village Memorial Park. The tabloids called it the Poltergeist Curse. They claimed the movie was haunted, that something supernatural had killed the cast. Nonsense, obviously. There was no curse, just terrible coincidence. Dominique was murdered by a violent man who served less than 4 years in prison. Heather died from a birth defect that doctors missed until it was too late. But the legend persisted because people need patterns where there's only chaos. Heather's grave is simple, flat bronze marker. Her parents chose an inscription. Star of Poltergeist was 2 and 3. Beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Visitors leave toys, flowers, notes thanking her for their childhood nightmares. The Poltergeist franchise kept going without her. There was a 2015 remake that nobody remembers. The original trilogy still plays on cable, still streams, still scares new generations of kids who have no idea the little blonde girl talking to the TV died before she made it to junior high. Westwood Village stays quiet. Tourists shuffle past looking for Marilyn's crypt. Heather rests 100 feet away, forgotten by everyone except the horror fans who know where to look. Jonathan Brandis. Jonathan Brandis has no public grave. He was cremated after his death in 2003, and his family never revealed where his ashes were scattered or interred. No memorial service, no headstone, no place for fans to visit. For a kid who received thousands of fan letters every week at the height of his fame, the silence is deafening. Jonathan grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, acting in commercials before he could read full sentences. By his early teens, he'd racked up appearances on L.A. Law, Murder, She Wrote, Who's the Boss, Full House, the standard rotation of 80s and 90s TV. In 1990, he landed the lead role in The Never-Ending Story 2, The Next Chapter. The film flopped, but Jonathan's performance got noticed. Then came Sequest DSV. The show premiered on NBC in September 1993, a science fiction series set on a futuristic submarine exploring Earth's oceans. Steven Spielberg executive produced. Roy Scheider starred as the captain. And Jonathan played Lucas Wolenchak, the teenage prodigy who could hack any computer, solve any problem, and looked like he belonged on the cover of Tiger Beat. Teen girls lost their minds at 15, 16, 17. Jonathan was everywhere. Magazine covers, talk show appearances, fan conventions where lines wrapped around buildings, NBC knew exactly what they had. A heartthrob who could act, a kid who could carry a primetime show aimed at families, but marketed to teenage girls who wanted his poster on their bedroom wall. For 3 seasons, Sequest dominated Sunday nights. Then the network started tinkering. They fired the showrunner, rewrote the premise, jumped the show forward 10 years in time, and aged up the cast. Jonathan's character was suddenly older, less central, competing for screen time with new actors brought in to boost ratings. The show was canceled in 1996 after season 3. Jonathan was 19 years old, and his career stalled immediately. He couldn't get the roles he wanted. He auditioned for serious dramatic parts, adult roles that would prove he wasn't just a teen idol. He lost them to actors who hadn't spent their adolescence on lunchboxes. He took smaller parts in smaller films. Sidekick in Heart's War. Supporting role in Ride with the Devil. He showed up in episodes of CSI and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, playing characters that barely registered. Friends said he took the decline hard, really hard. He'd gone from receiving thousands of fan letters a week to wondering if he'd ever work again. The industry that built him up had moved on, and nobody taught him how to handle that. Nobody prepared him for what happens when you're not the guy anymore. November 11th, 2003. Jonathan's apartment in Los Angeles. Late at night, he hanged himself. A friend found him the next morning and called 911. He was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but there was nothing they could do. Jonathan Brandis died on November 12, 2003. He was 27 years old. The news barely made a ripple. A few entertainment outlets ran obituaries. His fans, now in their 20s and 30s, mourned online in early internet forums. But Hollywood moved on within hours. There was no public memorial. His family kept everything private. They cremated him, and whatever they did with his remains, they never told anyone. Here's the gut punch. When the 2004 Academy Awards held their annual In Memoriam segment, Jonathan's name wasn't included. The Oscars, which pride themselves on honoring everyone the industry lost that year, didn't mention him. Neither did the Emmys. Neither did SAG. The omissions drew criticism from fans and a few journalists who remembered him, but the institutions didn't budge. Their excuse was always the same: limited time, too many deaths, hard choices about who to include. The subtext was clear. Jonathan Brandis wasn't important enough. Sequest DSV is hard to find now. It's not on major streaming platforms. A few episodes pop up on YouTube, low-quality uploads from old VHS recordings. The show that made Jonathan famous has been largely forgotten, and the kid who starred in it has no grave marker for people to visit. He's just gone, erased. A cautionary tale that nobody in Hollywood wanted to learn from. The pattern keeps repeating. Take a kid. Make them famous. Work them until they're used up. Then forget they ever existed. Brad Renfro. Knoxville, Tennessee. Red clay. Bible Belt. As far from Hollywood as you can get without leaving the country. Brad Renfro's remains came home to Tennessee after he died in Los Angeles in 2008. His family had him cremated, and somewhere in the Knoxville area, exactly where has never been made public, they laid him to rest. No grave marker for tourists, no shrine for fans, just a working-class kid who got chewed up by the industry and spit back out. Brad was discovered at age 10 by a casting director scouting real kids in Tennessee public schools. She was looking for someone authentic, someone rough around the edges, someone who hadn't been polished by acting coaches and stage mothers. She found Brad in a Knoxville elementary school, and within months, he was in Joel Schumacher's adaptation of The Client, starring opposite Susan Sarandon and Tommy Lee Jones. The film came out in 1994. Brad's performance as Mark Sway, the street-smart kid who witnesses a mob lawyer's suicide and becomes a target, was raw, natural, completely believable. Critics raved. The film made $117 million worldwide. At 11 years old, Brad Renfro was being called the next big thing. Hollywood came calling fast. He appeared in The Cure with Joseph Mazzello. He landed a role in Sleepers alongside Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Brad Pitt, and Kevin Bacon. Then came Apt Pupil with Ian McKellen and Ghost World with Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson. By the time he was 17, he'd worked with some of the biggest names in the business. He'd also developed a serious drug problem. Brad started using in his early teens. Marijuana first, then harder stuff. By 16, he was getting arrested. Possession charges, probation violations. He'd show up to court-mandated rehab, stay clean for a few weeks, then relapse. The pattern repeated over and over. His career kept going somehow. He was talented enough that directors kept hiring him despite the headlines, but the arrests kept piling up. In December 2005, Brad and a friend tried to steal a yacht in Fort Lauderdale. They were arrested before they even got the boat started. The incident was bizarre, almost comical, except it showed how far he'd fallen. This wasn't a kid experimenting with rebellion. This was someone spiraling completely out of control. He kept working in small roles, independent films, direct-to-DVD releases, parts that barely paid rent. His last credited role was in The Informers, a Bret Easton Ellis adaptation that he finished filming in 2007. The movie didn't come out until 2009, a year after he died. January 15, 2008. Brad's apartment in Los Angeles. He'd spent the previous night drinking with friends. When they left, he went to bed alone. The next morning, they found him unresponsive. The paramedics tried to revive him. They couldn't. The coroner's report came back weeks later. Acute heroin and morphine intoxication. Accidental overdose. Brad Renfro was 25 years old. His death came exactly 1 week before Heath Ledger died in New York. Heath's death dominated every news cycle for months. Front-page coverage, magazine tributes, endless speculation about The Dark Knight and the Joker role and whether the character drove him to depression. The 2009 Oscars gave Heath a standing ovation when he won Best Supporting Actor posthumously. Brad Renfro got a handful of obituaries buried in the entertainment sections. No magazine covers, no tributes. And when the 2009 Academy Awards held their In Memoriam segment, the same ceremony that honored Heath Ledger, Brad's name wasn't included. The omission sparked outrage from people who remembered him. How do you exclude a working actor with 20 film credits who died at 25? The Academy never explained, they just moved on. Brad's family brought his ashes back to Tennessee and kept the burial private. There's no marker. No place for fans to pay respects. He's just gone, erased from the same industry that discovered him in a Knoxville classroom and then forgot he existed the moment he stopped being profitable. The Client still plays on cable. You can stream it right now. Watch 11-year-old Brad hold the screen against Oscar winners. Watch him deliver a performance most adult actors would kill for. And know that he died broke and alone in an LA apartment with nobody from Hollywood at his funeral. Rusty Hamer, DeKalb County, Louisiana. Population barely 2,000. Swampland and pine forests an hour outside Shreveport. This is where Rusty Hamer shot himself in 1990. No grave here either. He was cremated, and his family scattered the ashes somewhere private. For a kid who spent 9 years on one of the most popular sitcoms in television history, the end came in obscurity so complete that most people didn't even know he was dead until months later. Rusty Hamer was 6 years old when he was cast as Rusty Williams on Make Room for Daddy in 1953. The show, later retitled The Danny Thomas Show, ran for 11 seasons and became a cornerstone of 1950s family television. Danny Thomas played a nightclub entertainer trying to balance career and family. Rusty played his son. For 9 years, from 1953 to 1964, America watched Rusty Hamer grow up on screen. The show was massive. It won multiple Emmy Awards. It spawned 2 spin-offs, The Andy Griffith Show and Gomer Pyle, USMC, both of which became even bigger hits. At its peak, The Danny Thomas Show pulled in 30 million viewers a week. Rusty was one of the most recognizable children in America. Then the show ended in 1964. Rusty was 17. He tried to keep acting, guest spots here and there, a failed attempt at a music career. By the early 1970s, the work had dried up completely. He wasn't a cute kid anymore, and he had no training for anything else. The money from the show, whatever he'd actually seen of it, was gone. He took jobs outside the industry, worked in restaurants, tried selling insurance. Nothing stuck. In 1976, he appeared in a Danny Thomas reunion special. It was supposed to be a nostalgia trip, a chance for fans to see the cast back together. Rusty looked uncomfortable the entire time, like he'd rather be anywhere else. After the special aired, he disappeared from public view entirely. He moved to Louisiana, took a job delivering restaurant supplies to survive, kept his head down, stopped talking about his childhood in Hollywood. Friends from that period said he rarely mentioned the show, and when he did, there was no warmth in his voice, just resentment. January 18, 1990. Rusty was found dead in his Louisiana home. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. He left no note, no explanation. The local coroner ruled it suicide, and the story barely made the news outside of Louisiana. Rusty Hamer was 42 years old. Entertainment Tonight ran a brief obituary. A few newspapers picked it up. Danny Thomas, who was still alive at the time, released a statement expressing sadness and shock, but there was no public memorial, no reunion of the cast to mourn him, just a quiet cremation and ashes scattered somewhere in the Louisiana swamps. The Danny Thomas Show still airs in reruns on classic TV networks. You can buy the complete series on DVD. The episodes are wholesome, funny, exactly the kind of comfort food television that boomers remember fondly. And in every single episode from 1953 to 1964, there's Rusty Hamer, smiling on cue, delivering his lines, playing the perfect TV son. Nobody watching has any idea that the kid on screen would end up delivering restaurant supplies in rural Louisiana before putting a gun to his head. The show made millions. It launched careers, it created a television dynasty that lasted decades, and it left Rusty Hamer with nothing but memories he wanted to forget. Trent Lehman, Pasadena, California. A park, a schoolyard, a fence. Trent Lehman hanged himself from a chain-link fence at Pasadena High School on January 14, 1982. He was 20 years old. Why a schoolyard fence? Nobody knows. He left no note. The police report offered no explanation. Just a young man found dead at dawn by a janitor arriving for work. Trent Lehman spent 3 seasons on Nanny and the Professor, an ABC sitcom that ran from 1970 to 1971. He played Butch Everett, the middle child in a family of 3 kids whose widowed father hires a mysterious British nanny with possible magical powers. The show was ABC's attempt to capture the success of the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family. Wholesome family sitcom, cute kids, feel-good plots that wrapped up in 22 minutes. It lasted 54 episodes across 3 seasons before cancellation. For Trent, those 3 years were everything. He was 8 when the show started, 11 when it ended. His entire childhood was that show. When it got canceled in 1971, the work stopped. Guest appearances dried up. Auditions led nowhere. By his mid-teens, he wasn't acting at all. Friends from his teenage years described him as lost. He didn't know who he was outside of being Butch Everett. He hadn't gone to regular school. Child actors rarely did back then. He had no education beyond studio tutors, no skills beyond memorizing lines, no plan for what came next. He drifted through his late teens doing odd jobs. Tried community college but dropped out. Tried reconnecting with people from the show, but everyone had moved on. The kids he'd worked with were gone. The adults didn't return his calls. Hollywood had forgotten him completely. January 1982. Trent was living in the San Fernando Valley, working sporadic day labor jobs, increasingly isolated. On the night of January 13th, he told a friend he was going for a walk. He never came home. The next morning, a janitor opening Pasadena High School found his body hanging from the fence that surrounded the athletic field. Trent had used his belt. The coroner estimated he'd been dead for several hours. Trent Lehman was 20 years old. The death got a paragraph in the Los Angeles Times, a few lines in Variety. No major obituaries, no statements from ABC or the producers of Nanny and the Professor. Just silence. He was cremated. His family held a small private service. Where his ashes ended up, nobody outside the family knows. There's no grave to visit, no memorial marker, nothing. Nanny and the Professor occasionally shows up on retro TV channels, usually in the dead of night when nobody's watching. The show hasn't aged well. The plots are thin, the magic is barely there, the whole thing feels like a fever dream from a different era. But Trent is there in every episode, a little kid doing his best with material that wasn't worth remembering. The show gave him 3 years of work. Then it took away his identity and left him with nothing to replace it. 20 years old? A schoolyard fence. No note, no explanation, just another TV child star who couldn't figure out how to be anything else. Scotty Beckett. Hollywood Forever Cemetery again. We're back where we started, but in a different section. Away from the famous crypts and tourist attractions. over near the eastern wall where the grass gets patchy and the headstones are simpler. Scotty Beckett's grave is here, flat marker, easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Most people walk right past without recognizing the name. But if you're over 60, you might remember him as Scotty from the Our Gang comedies in the 1930s, or as Winky from the Rocky Jones, Space Ranger television series in the 1950s, or from any of the 100-plus film and TV appearances he racked up between 1933 and 1958. Scotty Beckett started working at age 3. By age 5, he was a regular in the Our Gang shorts, playing alongside Spanky McFarland and Carl Alfalfa Switzer. He appeared in major films throughout the 1930s and 40s, A Star is Born, The Charge of the Light Brigade, King's Row, The Jolson Story. He was a working child actor who successfully transitioned to adult roles, which almost never happened. Then came television. In 1954, Scotty landed the role of Winky in Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, a syndicated sci-fi series aimed at kids. He played the comic relief sidekick, the bumbling co-pilot who provided laughs between space battles. The show ran for 2 seasons and made Scotty's face familiar to a new generation of children. But behind the scenes, everything was falling apart. Scotty had developed a drinking problem in his 20s. By the time Rocky Jones ended in 1955, the drinking had progressed to full-blown alcoholism. He couldn't hold jobs, couldn't show up on time, couldn't remember lines. The work stopped coming. Then came the arrests, bar fights, drunk and disorderly, assault charges. In 1954, he was arrested for beating his wife. In 1957, he was arrested for drunk driving and carrying a concealed weapon. The pattern repeated: arrest, bail, promise to get sober, relapse. In May 1968, Scotty checked into a Los Angeles nursing home, claiming he'd been beaten and robbed. He had injuries consistent with his story: lacerations, bruising, but the details kept changing. Police investigated but couldn't confirm what actually happened. 2 days later, while still in the nursing home, Scotty was found unconscious in his room. He died on May 10, 1968. The official cause was listed as a combination of alcohol, barbiturates, and the injuries he'd sustained. The coroner couldn't determine if the overdose was intentional or accidental. The case was ruled undetermined. Scotty Beckett was 38 years old. His funeral was small. A handful of people from the industry showed up, mostly out of obligation. He was buried here at Hollywood Forever in a plot his family could barely afford. For years, the grave was unmarked. Eventually someone, maybe family, maybe a fan, purchased a simple flat marker. It reads, Scotty Beckett, 1929 to 1968. Beloved son and brother. No mention of Our Gang. No mention of Rocky Jones. No mention of the 100 films. Just beloved son and brother, which is true but incomplete. The Our Gang shorts still play constantly, on YouTube, on classic TV channels, in compilations. Rocky Jones episodes are harder to find, but they're out there, uploaded by nostalgic boomers who remember watching them after school. And in every frame, there's Scotty Beckett, performing for audiences who have no idea what happened to him after the cameras stopped. 3 years old to 38 years old. 35 years in the industry. Started as one of the most famous child actors in America. Died in a nursing home with unexplained injuries and a belly full of pills. Hollywood Forever keeps the grass cut. Tourists walk past looking for Johnny Ramone's statue and Judy Garland's mausoleum. Scotty Beckett rests in the shadows. Another child star the industry used up and forgot. Michelle Thomas. Montclair, New Jersey. Rosedale Cemetery. A quiet suburban burial ground where the headstones are modest and the visitors are mostly local families tending to their own. Michelle Thomas is buried here. Section 6, Lot 172. Her grave gets flowers regularly, but not from fans. From family, from the people who knew her before Hollywood, before she became Myra Monkhouse's best friend on Family Matters, before she played Justine Phillips on The Cosby Show. Michelle was different from most of the names on this list. She didn't start as a child. She broke through at 17 with a recurring role on The Cosby Show in 1988, playing Theo Huxtable's girlfriend Justine for 3 seasons. Smart, beautiful, grounded, she was the kind of character that felt real, not written. When that show ended, she transitioned seamlessly to Family Matters in 1993, playing Myra, The sweet counterpoint to Jaleel White's nerdy Steve Urkel and Kelly Shaneen Williams's Laura Winslow. For 5 seasons, Michelle was a series regular on one of ABC's biggest TGIF sitcoms. The show pulled in millions of viewers every Friday night. She worked steadily, built a career, seemed to have avoided the traps that caught so many young performers. Then in 1998, during production on season 9, she got sick. Stomach pains, fatigue. Doctors initially thought it was stress. Then they ran tests and found a mass. Intra-abdominal desmoplastic small round cell tumor, an extremely rare and aggressive cancer that primarily affects young adults. By the time they found it, the disease was already advanced. Michelle started chemotherapy immediately while still trying to work. She filmed episodes of Family Matters between treatments, hiding how sick she was, not wanting to slow down production. The show's writers started reducing her screen time as her condition worsened, but they kept her in the cast, kept paying her, kept hoping she'd recover. She didn't. Michelle Thomas died on December 23, 1998, at her mother's home in New York. She was 30 years old. Her death devastated the Family Matters cast. Jaleel White gave interviews where he broke down talking about her. Reginald VelJohnson, who played Carl Winslow, said losing Michelle felt like losing a daughter. The show dedicated an episode to her memory and announced they wouldn't recast the role. Myra would simply be gone, written out with a line about moving away. Family Matters ended its run in 1998, the same year Michelle died. The final season aired in the summer of 1998, just months before her death. Reruns continued for years on cable, introducing new generations to the Winslow family and Steve Urkel's catchphrase, "Did I do that?" Michelle is in those episodes, smiling, acting, completely unaware that cancer was already growing inside her. Her grave at Rosedale Cemetery is simple, a flat granite marker with her name, dates, and a short epitaph chosen by her mother. Forever in our hearts. Family visits regularly. A few dedicated fans make the trip to Montclair to pay respects, but most people who remember Myra Monkhouse have no idea where Michelle Thomas is buried. The tragedy here isn't drugs or suicide or Hollywood exploitation, it's just cruel, random biology. Michelle did everything right. She worked hard, stayed grounded, avoided the pitfalls, and she still died at 30 because cells in her abdomen decided to mutate. Family Matters streams on Hulu and Paramount+. You can binge all 9 seasons right now. Watch Michelle Thomas smile through episodes she filmed while dying, and realize that sometimes the industry doesn't destroy you. Sometimes life just ends before you're ready, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Bobby Driscoll. Hart Island, the Bronx, New York City's Potter's Field, where unclaimed bodies go when nobody claims them. Bobby Driscoll is buried somewhere in the mass graves here. Nobody knows exactly where. There's no marker, no headstone, no way to visit him specifically. Just an island covered in unmarked trenches where New York buries its forgotten dead. How does the first actor Walt Disney ever put under personal contract end up in a pauper's grave? Bobby Driscoll was Hollywood's golden boy in the 1940s. He starred in Song of the South, So Dear to My Heart, and Treasure Island. At 12 years old, he received a Special Academy Juvenile Award and actual Oscar for outstanding performance. Then in 1953, he became the voice and animation model for Peter Pan, Disney's adaptation of The Boy Who Never Grows Up. He was the first male actor to ever play Peter Pan. The role had traditionally gone to women. Bobby broke that tradition and made the character his own. Then puberty hit, acne, voice cracks, the cute kid became an awkward teenager. Disney terminated his contract almost immediately after Peter Pan's release. No explanation, no transition plan, just gone. Bobby tried to keep working, couldn't get cast. The industry that worshipped him as a child wanted nothing to do with him as a teenager. He spiraled into drugs, got arrested multiple times, served time in prison. In the mid-1960s, he drifted to New York and briefly joined Andy Warhol's factory scene as an artist. March 30, 1968. 2 boys playing in an abandoned tenement on East 10th Street found a body on a cot. The man had been dead for days. No identification. No one in the neighborhood recognized him. The body was tagged as John Doe and buried on Hart Island. A year and a half later, Bobby's mother contacted Disney to get his fingerprints. She'd been searching for her son, hadn't heard from him in months, feared the worst. When she got the prints and matched them to the John Doe buried on Hart Island, the truth came out. Bobby Driscoll had been dead for 18 months, buried in a mass grave, completely forgotten. He was 31 years old. His name appears on his father's gravestone at a cemetery in California, but it's only a memorial marker. Bobby's actual remains are still on Hart Island, mixed with hundreds of other unidentified bodies in unmarked trenches that the public isn't allowed to access. Peter Pan still plays on Disney+, still sells merchandise, still makes the company money. The boy who gave Peter his voice is buried in a potter's field, and Disney never acknowledged him beyond a brief statement when the story went public in 1969. Bridgette Anderson, Inglewood Park Cemetery, Los Angeles. A sprawling cemetery near LAX where planes roar overhead every few minutes, drowning out whatever peace the dead are supposed to have. Bridgette Anderson is buried here in the Acacia section. Her grave gets almost no visitors. She was 7 years old when she starred opposite Richard Pryor in The Lonely Guy in 1984. Adorable, talented, camera-ready. She landed guest roles on Remington Steele, Elsewhere, and a memorable appearance on Family Ties playing a neighbor kid. She worked steadily through the mid-1980s, appeared in after-school specials, did the TV movie circuit. Then adolescence arrived and the phone stopped ringing. By her teens, Bridgette was struggling. No roles, no plan. Her parents had divorced, money problems piled up. She started using drugs. Friends said it started as experimentation and turned into dependency fast. May 18, 1997. Bridgette overdosed at a friend's home in Los Angeles. Heroin mixed with alcohol. The paramedics tried to save her. She was pronounced dead at the hospital. Bridgette Anderson was 21 years old. Her funeral drew a small crowd. Family, a few childhood friends, nobody from the industry. She was buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery, in a plot her family could barely afford. The headstone is simple. Her name, her dates, nothing else. The films she made as a child occasionally show up on late-night cable. Brief flashes of a little girl who could act, who had timing, who seemed destined for a long career. Then nothing. Just a grave under a flight path where nobody comes to visit anymore. Thompson Young, Los Angeles, North Hollywood. An apartment complex on Camrose Drive where nobody famous lives and nobody expects tragedy. Thompson Young shot himself here on August 19, 2013. He was 29 years old. Lee wasn't a child star in the traditional sense. He was a teenager when he landed the lead role in the famous Jet Jackson on Disney Channel in 1998. The show ran for 3 seasons and made him the face of the network for kids who grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s. He played Jet Jackson, a teen actor starring in an action show who moves back to his small hometown to live a normal life. Meta, clever, and Lee carried it with charm that felt effortless. After the show ended in 2001, Lee transitioned to adult roles better than most. He appeared in Friday Night Lights, Smallville, Flash Forward, and landed a recurring role on Rizzoli and Isles. He was working. He was successful by any reasonable measure, but he battled bipolar disorder in private. Depression that came in waves. He managed it quietly, never let it become public, kept working through it. August 19, 2013, Lee didn't show up to the set of Rizzoli and Isles. His landlord was called to check on him. They found his body in his apartment. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. His death stunned everyone who knew him. Co-stars described him as kind, professional, always smiling. His family released a statement confirming he'd struggled with depression and bipolar disorder, urging others to seek help. Lee was cremated. His family held a private service. Where his ashes ended up, they never said publicly. The famous Jet Jackson streams on Disney+. Lee's face is frozen at 15, 16, 17. A kid playing an action hero, completely unaware that at 29 he'd be gone. Carl Switzer, Hollywood Forever Cemetery, same grounds as Judy Garland, same grounds as Scotty Beckett, different section. Carl Alfalfa Switzer, that cowlick, that off-key singing, that freckled face that made him the breakout star of our gang. He was shot to death in 1959 over a $50 debt related to a hunting dog, 31 years old. The shooting was ruled justifiable homicide. His grave has a hunting dog carved into it, not Pete from the show but a tribute to the life he built after Hollywood forgot him. 15 graves. Some you can visit, some you can't. some don't exist at all. These were the TV child stars who lit up living rooms across America and then disappeared. Some died young from overdoses, some from suicide, some from violence, one from cancer. One was buried as a John Doe in a potter's field. The shows they starred in still air, still stream, still make money for networks and studios. But the kids who made them possible? Most of them are forgotten. Their graves sit empty of visitors. Their names don't appear in awards show tributes. Hollywood moved on the second they stopped being profitable. That's the real curse. Not supernatural, just institutional amnesia. Thanks for taking this journey. Remember their names. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.